Hello there and welcome to Mr. Iyer's Digital Dialogue. We are all about using technology to solve everyday problems. And, of course, your host is none other than Mr. Iyer himself, an expert in all things SaaS and the digital world.
Welcome to the next episode of the Fractional Series.
Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Mr. Iyer's Digital Dialogue, where we explore the cutting-edge strategies shaping today's digital business landscape. I'm your host, Mahesh Iyer, and today we continue our exciting Fractional Series, where we deep dive into how fractional leadership is revolutionizing business growth and scalability. Joining us today is Roger, a distinguished veteran of the IT industry with an impressive track record spanning over 3 decades. From leadership roles at tech giants Microsoft and HP to driving success as a chief revenue officer in multiple startups. Roger has orchestrated 5 major exits at delivering a remarkable $600 million in enterprise returns to shareholders. Today, he's channeling his fractional CRO CMO expertise, helping SaaS companies scale to new heights. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Thanks, Mahesh. Delighted to be here.
Roger, probably you could just give a brief intro from your side. I know I covered it most, but maybe you can talk a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it brief. Yeah, as you said, I started my career a long time ago back at Hewlett-Packard as a graduate, and I went through their training scheme, became a new business sales guy, stayed there for about 6 years, and then moved into the software industry. I spent about 6 years at Microsoft or so. And I built up their partner program with systems integrators, new business sales, and ran consulting services for a while. And then I, in the early 2000s, started my more entrepreneurial career, if you like. I founded my own company, which was a software and managed services business, which I then sold to a US company. I then was part of their team as VP Europe, which we then sold on again a year later. And I've then been through a further 4 SaaS startups, scale-ups, and exits as chief revenue officer. So yeah, that's my background. So I've learned a lot along the way, made some mistakes, but I've obviously learned the good things and the bad things and the traps. And then about a year ago, after my last exit, moved into being a fractional. So here I am.
Roger, now, your journey spans 30 years across tech giants and startups. What key lessons from Microsoft and HP have, proven most valuable in your startup ventures?
I guess from the beginning, working for a big company like Microsoft and then one like HP, I mean, at the beginning of my career, I didn't know anything about sales and tech sales and business sales and B2B. So that gave me an amazing grounding, number one, because they're one of those early companies that really invested in their people and their graduates. So you really got to see different departments, types of the business, different aspects. And I really cut my teeth in sales and really understood consultative and value-based selling. And then in Microsoft, obviously, over the following kind of 10, 15 years, the IT industry changed dramatically. Not least of which the internet came along, which changed things an awful lot because my career at the beginning was pre-internet, and then joined Microsoft, the internet came along. But Microsoft was an incredible journey because he was going through that whole expansion of Windows. Apple were growing like crazy. So that was an exciting time as the world then started to move into the cloud as well. So yeah, I learned an awful lot during those years, which then gave me the bug to go and do my own thing.
And $600 million in 8 major exits in returns. That's quite a big amount. What's the secret sauce of driving such successful outcomes?
The thing that I do now that I really advise my clients on, which is why I've started my own fractional business, is first of all, the secret sauce is to really understand your value proposition in detail, and you can explain it to somebody else. It used to be called the elevator pitch. To some extent, I suppose it is, but it's really understanding your value proposition from a customer perspective. So I always say start with the why, not the what. Many companies start with, they're very proud of their technology, what they do. The customers aren't interested. They want to know, what can you do for me? So that's the first thing. The second thing is knowing your ideal customer profile. Who very narrow focus. Who are you targeted on? What industry, what companies, what size of companies? And within that, what individual personalities are you selling to? Which job titles, which personas? And really become very, very narrow, very focused. From that, everything flows. Your marketing, your sales, your collateral, your website, everything follows from there. So I would say they are the most important things to begin with. From that, it's all about solid execution and being metrics driven.
I've been with some large organizations, and then when I took over fractional, initially it was like, what am I doing? And then I figured it out. So what's your take on it? And what inspired you?
Yeah, I think after my last exit about 18 months ago, I took a bit of a break just to go and do some personal things. And that kind of gave me the time and the space just to stop thinking about the world of sales and growth and startups and scale up. And then when I came back into it, I thought, well, what am I going to do? Am I just going to apply for another job, or will I go for the next thing that comes along? And then I thought, well, actually, given all the experiences I've had with growth and scale ups and what have you, there are many companies, and I would say a huge numbers of startups and scale ups. They're founder led. The founders tend to be either from the specific industry they come from, they're technical, they don't really know, they've never done it before, they don't know the pitfalls, they don't understand sales, marketing, scale, growth, and they don't know the traps and the pitfalls. And I thought, well, I can codify this because I've been through it so many times, obviously made my share of mistakes along the way and learned from those. So I thought, well, I could actually add a lot of value to these growing companies because of what I've done, as long as I can offer it as a service with a number of steps. So that's what inspired me to do it. Yeah, that was the thesis anyway, Mahesh.
So you're a friend. I'm like me. I correlate with what we both have, done. I also, it's 18 months back was my real start into fractional, and I'm also a CRO like you. But I want to know your perspective. Well, how do you differ a fractional CRO from a traditional full-time CRO?
Yeah, I think in the early stages or the early growth or expansion stages, the old model used to be these companies would typically, they've gone through like bootstrap funding, maybe angel investor, they're looking for Series A. They get their Series A and then they hire a full management team, full time, full execs with share options and, the likes of you and I in full time roles. We're not cheap people who are, so I looked at it and I thought, I've seen lots of disasters as well. I've seen people in industries or companies that I've had to go into. I've done a few rescue jobs as well. And I've seen people hire CROs, CMOs that have been a disaster. They've got a great CV on paper from big enterprises. They've not necessarily ever done a startup or scale up, but they talk a good story and a good fight. It ends up being an absolute nightmare. And then, they've got to onboard them. Then they've got to exit them a year later. And it costs a lot of money and lost opportunity cost. So the big benefit of a fractional, from my point of view, it's very low risk for the company bringing the likes of you and I on board. We can do it for 1 or 2 days a week. We are deliverables focused. So I break down for my clients what I'm going to do over 1, 2, 3 months. We then decide, okay, we've done those things, we're going to move on to the next. So I give them a program of works. It's a bit like building a building. You start with the foundations, then you put the walls up, then you put the windows in, then you do the electricals and so on and so forth until the thing's finished. And I think that's what you and I can do at a lower risk, lower cost, and then we can move on based on success. And we can do it for several clients. So I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I agree. I was doing, when first time somebody hired me to be a fractional CRO, I realized they already burned their fingers with hiring a VP of sales at a very, high cost. And he was not able to understand the startup mindset, was not able to manage the team well. I come in at 1/3 of the cost. And of course, we don't work full time. We work for a couple of hours in a week. And that sort of helps them to take a breather when it comes to cost, take a breather when it comes to managing people, handling people. A lot of people don't understand that they mix it up with a consultant. We are not a consultant. We
Yes,
are still on the
exactly.
roles of a company. We are full-time, part-time, working in on the roles of a company. The sales team, the marketing team used to report into me. It's not that they are working in silos. They work with me. They ensure that the deliverables are there. Very well said, Roger. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. But when you're managing multiple clients, how do you establish trust as a fractional leader versus a full-time executive?
I guess it comes down to the things I was saying earlier on, that you set the objectives and the goals of the engagements out up front, and then you start delivering against those things. So, for example, a client I started with a year ago, the first thing I had to do was really focus in on their value proposition and their ICP and define that. Then we worked on their CRM. So then we started defining all the stages in their CRM system, the sales stages, and the definitions of what had to be done. So it was like step by step by step. And I think when they see, it's probably the same for you, Mahesh, once they've seen you've actually done some work, you've been on the sales meetings, you've helped them with their forecasting, you're helping to coach the team. I mean, I coach the leadership team, the founders, and they begin to gradually understand, you know what you're talking about and you're adding value, and then the trust builds from there.
Excellent, excellent. I want to go one step ahead and ask you this. You work with a lot of SaaS companies, and what's the most common revenue challenges you encounter in scaling the SaaS company? Do you have a sweet spot? Like, do you work with 0 to 1, 1 to 10, pre-series A? What's your sweet spot?
I tend not to work with pre-seed or seed because they're struggling to get product market fit and traction, and probably they're not ready to start spending money. I mean, I did make a mistake about a year ago. I got approached by a pre-seed company and wanted to work with me, but they just really weren't ready. And it's somebody, they have to be ready at a point where there's an identified market. They know what their addressable market is. They've actually got some view of, they've got some references, but they're just on that cusp of scaling, and maybe they've either got a good, strong angel investor or they've done a Series A. I think prior to that, it's very difficult, and I think the likes of you and I could maybe dip in here and there for a few hours, but we can't really offer our full value to scale.
Right.
So in terms of turnover, I would say probably the smallest would be maybe K in recurring, as long as they got a solid product, they've got some references, and you can see a path to actually raise some funding. Probably the maximum might be 20 to 30 million. It just depends what sort of how much they've gone internationally. What does the management team look like? What does the sales to marketing team look like? And do they need more help in scaling?
And do you have any specific geographies? You're based out of UK? Is there any specific geographies you like to target, or and adding to that, if you're managing multiple geography, how do you manage remotely sitting out of UK? Let's say you have a team sitting in India, or a team sitting in US, or a team sitting in Australia. How do you manage that? Both of them. One is with geographies, and how do you manage them?
Yeah, it's not so much the geography as the time zone challenge, as I'm sure you know, Mahesh. I mean, in my previous role, I managed a global team. I had a team physically in Australia, New Zealand. I had some teams in Singapore, Hong Kong, USA, both coasts. And it became an enormous challenge in terms of just catching up with people, because Australia is 12 hours adrift. So you'd only either talk to them early in the morning, UK time, or really late at night. USA doesn't come online till later in the afternoon. So that is a bit of a challenge, to be honest with you. I tend to focus at the moment on UK and European-based companies for time zone. I'm not against going wider. And one of my clients now is scaling up to Australia, and we do have to have calls with Australia. We have calls with the USA. It's just a matter of booking it into the calendar, but then managing it and making sure you've got a good management system, and you've got good metrics, and you've got good data, so you can actually see what's going on.
Great. Talking about metrics, a couple of things I wanted to ask. One is metrics for evaluating your company's revenue potential, and second is metrics and KPIs for you to manage the company overall as a fractional.
Yeah. As a fractional, when I start, I ask them everything about their business, from, top level, previous revenues. I look at their pipeline. I want to know about their costs. Obviously, how much cash are they burning? How many people have they got? All of the typical metrics that a venture capital company might look at. So because that's always important to know and understand their strategy as well. Their target market, where they've had success, where they've had failures, who they focus on, just so I can get a really strong feel as to what their journey's been like. It's a bit like, going to the doctor for a diagnosis, really, to figure out what's the matter with the patient, what's going on. So you need to test all the temperatures, pressures, everything. From there, I can then say, okay, right, we need to focus on this. You're focusing on the wrong sector. Your pricing is wrong. We need to look at a lot of different things. But then once we've actually got those things fixed, the operational metrics will come down to, well, what are we doing for driving the top end of the pipe? What activities have we got going on from a marketing perspective to drive marketing qualified leads? Are they converting into sales qualified leads to demos through to close won deals? How long does that take? How long do things stay in sales stages? Do we measure them? Do we know what the percentage conversion rates are? All of those kinds of metrics. And then they all go into CRM, whatever CRM they're using, from Salesforce, HubSpot, you name it. But then we start to make sure we review those things on a weekly basis. Then you're into all the tactics of how do we prosecute those deals down the pipe? Are we being ruthless enough in making sure we qualify things out? Are we using consistent structured sales methodologies? All of those things I put in place, but I want to see the metrics as well, from marketing through to sales.
We talk about AI, Everybody's talking about AI, whether it is in sales or marketing. In fact, I'm doing a complete new podcast series on AI in sales and marketing. You being a revenue person, I want to ask, what's the impact is AI having on revenue operations and sales strategies?
I haven't seen a lot so far. I mean, I've seen some tools. I won't name the companies, but I get approached all the time for, some companies saying, oh, we've got this fantastic AI platform that will replace your sales development reps, or it will go out and do automatic dialing for you. And I've actually tested a couple of them out recently, and they were kind of variable. AI isn't going to replace a human being anytime soon because, particularly in enterprise sales, I could see it in a business to consumer environment, but business to business enterprise, you actually have to have a conversation with a human being, and they want to see a person, they want to see a business person, they want somebody to understand their problems and challenges. So I think AI, it's more from a perspective of, the companies I work with are embracing it within their technology for automating processes and ingesting data, doing machine learning and refining results and things like this. I see that more of the value rather than trying to replace salespeople. Maybe from some of the automated marketing campaigns and things, you could use AI. I can see a good use for that.
Interesting. After you spoke about automated AI replacing an SDR, I'm one of my clients now, an AI company which is designed, they call themselves as an AI SDR, where they are saying that you don't need, instead of 10 SDRs, you work with 2 SDRs. The AI SDR will generate those leads, call the customers. Of course, when I heard it first time, when I could sense that it's a robot. And I know as a sales leader for the last 22.5 decades, the moment customer picks up the phone, he knows it's an AI. They know instantly. You can refine it as much as possible, but still that human angle is not there. And I had to change their entire narrative. I told them that don't become an AI SDR, become an AI SDR enabler company. Enable the SDR. Don't tell them that you're going to replace an SDR. So I know where you're coming from. Even though we talk about AI so much, but I'm not seeing much impact. It's more like an automation, not an AI. AI and automation are two different things. People mix it up. People say automation is AI. It's not that. AI is completely different, where your sales team is enabled really well with lots and lots of information, and those information are processed real time for you to actually help. But again, that's a good bit, Roger. I want to ask you, I know you're very new in the role of a fractional. You've been in 18 months. How have you seen the two sides of it. One is how has the CRO role evolved in the past decade, and where do you see it is heading, both on the full-time side and the fractional side? Or maybe you can pick up one.
On the full-time side, I mean, there's still jobs out there. But I think one of the problems with the full-time side that I've seen over the last several years has been you get somebody who's maybe they get 18 months tenure, they don't hit their numbers, they get fired. And then the company then replaces them and brings somebody else in. They have 18 months, they get fired. So this idea, I've seen it time again, where companies think they can just fire their way to success. And it's a very naive and unintelligent way of managing the business. So I think from a fractional point of view, and I work with a network of different fractionals, so I'm in a few different fractional groups. I've met fractional chief financial officers, chief marketing officers, people like yourself, Mahesh, who do a similar role to me. And we tend to team up and share information. And I think we have to be very sharp and on point. And it's a different way of thinking and working, because if we don't add short-term value quickly, we just won't have our contracts renewed. It's as simple as that. Whereas I think the bigger companies who employ a full-time person, they feel sort of married to them in a way. And it's going to be a very expensive divorce to get rid of a permanent CMO, CRO. My estimation of it and my view of the market is the fractional executives is on the rise. I think because people realize, that we can add value very quickly in a very focused way. So I think that's the difference. I hope that answers your question. I may have gone off track a bit.
You said some very well point. I love what you said. Now, even though we are short term, in the short term, we give them full gain for them, because in short time, we are bound, because we know that our gigs are not very full time or long run. We ensure that it's a successful gig. We ensure that our KPIs are taken care, and we measure those KPIs really well.
The other thing, I'm going to just chip in one more thing, Matt, as you just sprang to mind, if you don't mind me jumping in, is the other thing that we do. We come at it from a completely fresh perspective, and we're not embroiled in the politics of the company either. We're not looking for a career. We don't need to tell people they've done a great job. We can say, if your pitch deck's wrong, that needs to change. If your branding's wrong, or we can tell them where things need to be fixed and not be embarrassed about it, and they'll listen to us. Whereas an internal person might feel too scared or too politically out on a limb to say it. So I think we've got that luxury, I would say.
So what advice would you give to companies, consulting, looking for a fractional leader?
The first thing I would say is don't buy a CV. So I've seen quite a few people recently trying to get themselves out there as a fractional, and they think it's like going for a job interview. And I've had a few potential clients come to me, and the first thing they've said is, can I see your CV? And I said, well, you can, but I want to talk to you about my value proposition first of all. And that goes beyond my CV, because you're not hiring me. You're basically hiring my deliverables. So my advice to a company looking for a fractional would be, look at what this person can deliver, look at what their value proposition is, ask them what they'll do for us rather than what they've done over the last 20, 30 years and, with their jobs and CV. It might be impressive, but they might know nothing about scaling a business and what the pitfalls are. So I would say they really need to dig into where they've done it before. Not, if they've worked for 20 years for a big American corporate or whatever, that's probably not going to be a recipe for success, because they've never done it for a smaller company.
One more thing about fractional is you're managing multiple clients, right? How do you manage your work-life balance? I know we for any customers, we don't work for more than 5 to 10 hours a week, but still, if you're managing, let's say 2-3 clients, how do you manage it? Let's say they are from 3 different industry. Sometimes I get confused. I'm managing 2 customers now, and both are different industry. I do follow a good para calendar for myself, a note keeper. I do it on Apple Notes, which is using the para formula, ensure that I have projects, areas, resources, and archives managed well. What about you? How do you manage this multiple client scenario?
Similar to you. I mean, I've got a sort of a modern way and an old-fashioned way in parallel. So I keep a notebook for each client with their name on the front of it, and I keep notes and meeting notes. And I find that helps me mentally, actually, that I can sort of turn the page and I can go to my client A book and then my client B book. I've obviously got my diary and my calendar on my laptop, and that's all set out, and I know who I'm talking to and when. But I have a specific management system. So with one of my clients, I actually publish a management system for them, and I say, this is when we're going to meet, purposes of the meetings, what we're doing and when we're doing it. And that's set out through the week, and I do that for each client. And then I just have to, flip the switch and know who I'm talking to and why and what we did last time, what we've agreed to do next time. But yeah, you do have to be careful that you don't do too much, because sometimes it can spill into weekends. And I do find, I don't know how you find it, Mahesh, but I have found that it's gone really, really busy for some weeks, and then you can have a little bit, it can go a bit calmer, because sometimes they can really lean on you and you might have to do extra work or extra hours, but that's fine. That's just the way it goes.
Two last questions before we go to the fun segment. One is, how do you handle cultural aspects of multiple organizations? I know you're managing multiple clients, different organizations. Both might have different style of working, different style. I know you did say about managing that with your style of having two books, and that is more related to your calendar stuff. But in terms of culture, how do you manage them? Because both might have work differently. One might be more serious, and they might have everything sorted. They might be very well documented. Another might be a chaotic. How do you handle that?
Yeah. I think it comes down to that initial diagnosis, and because I've got a lot of experience having worked with different companies, both small and large, and I've seen lots of different cultures, I tend to tune into it quite quickly, and I do ask them how they work. What does your system look like today? And then it's just a matter of being in the meetings and understanding how people work, how they interact, and just kind of sliding into their way of operating and see what works. Yeah.
And one last question. What's the advice to the upcoming fractional executives who are looking to make a career becoming a fractional executive? A lot of people are now getting into it. I keep getting DMs that, I want to get into fractionals. Can you advise me? So what's your advice?
Yeah, I've advised a few people, not that I'm a world expert, but I've been doing it for just over a year. And the first thing my advice is, work out what your value proposition is and why should anybody employ Mahesh or Roger. So if you're coming into it, don't worry about your CV. Think about what you're going to do for the client. What type of client? Can you back it up with your experience? Your CV is your backup, your proof point. Your value proposition is what you're going to do for them. And then why should they hire you? Write it all down on a piece of paper first, and then document it, and then try and break it out into deliverables. And then you've got a clear picture in your head and a clear pitch. So that's the first thing.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the rapid fire, the fun segment.
Okay.
You'll have to be very quick. So are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Simple. Let's start with simple. Coffee or tea, and how many cups a day?
Oh, coffee in the morning, 2 cups. From then on, tea.
Okay. Microsoft or Apple?
Bit of both. I've got a laptop, a Microsoft laptop, and I've got an iPad. I've also got an Android phone. So I've kind of got all the operating systems. Yeah, I've got everything going on.
I've got an Android, Samsung, I've got an Apple. My ecosystem is completely Apple. So yeah, this works. Best business book you have read in the last year?
Probably, I've got it under here actually, The Lean Startup.
If you were in tech sales, what you would be doing?
I weren't in tech sales, what would I be doing? Wow. Well, it all depends. Probably a professional sailing coach.
Remote work or office? What's your preference?
A bit of a blend, but more remote than office-based.
Roger, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking time and you're doing this with us. Any last words from you?
No, that was really interesting, Mahesh. I enjoyed the call. Great questions. And hopefully we can do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Roger.
Cheers, Mahesh.
And that brings us to the end of another exciting episode of Mr. Iyer's Digital Dialogue. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the fascinating world of technology and transformation. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platforms. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, and all other major podcast apps. Hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest episodes exploring the cutting edge of digital innovation. Remember to share this episode with friends and colleagues who might find value in these conversations. Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep transforming.